challenge that we face today in the energy sector is very simple, and it's a question of stability, and it's a question of certainty, both for the people that are making the investments or the decisions to invest in production in Canada's energy sector, as well as for the people who I talk to every day who have selected me to be their voice in Ottawa. It's a question of certainty, and it's a question of stability. If you are, Mr. Speaker, for the colleagues opposite that are laughing at this tonight, give your head a shake. When you are sitting around a corporate board table and you are trying to determine whether or not you should spend several $billions on a major capital investment, you look at several determinants. You look at labor availability, political stability, the market conditions. You look at all sorts of things, and you make a determination based on a set of information that is available to you at the time. But you have to be certain that that information is right and that it's going to stay stable. If you are a worker and you are trying to decide whether or not you stay in a region, or whether or not you sell your house, or what sort of purchases you make, or how you make ends meet, if there's no certainty in an area, you're going to make a decision one way or the other. And the problem that we've seen with this government over the last 3 years is a question of instability. So at a time when we saw a change in the supply-side model of energy products in North America, as the Americans started to come on stream with more energy supply, and of course, we could spend a whole bunch of time talking about the demand-side model internationally as well, but as we saw a change in the supply-side model, what the government should have done at that point in time, when we started to see that shift as they came into government in 2015, was did everything in their power to make it more certain and more stable for the workers of Canada's energy sector to stay and prosper in Canada, and for those who seek to invest in Canada's energy sector to do so. So what does this government need to do to rectify decisions that it's made that has led to instability, and to see projects built out from here on in? First of all, the government has to scrap its carbon tax. This creates instability in investment in the energy sector and creates a burden on energy sector workers. There is no economic modeling to show that it will actually reduce greenhouse gas emissions, because for the most part, carbon in Canada is price inelastic. The second thing that it needs to do is repeal the fact that they cancelled the oil and gas exploration drilling tax credit during a major downturn in the Canadian economy. They need to reverse that decision that they made. They need to reverse the tanker ban that they put in place. They need to reverse that. They also put in place a 5-year moratorium on northern oil and gas exploration, giving the territorial governments less than 2 hours' notice. Instability. They need to reverse that decision that they made. They also need to reverse the decisions that they made around the methane regulation framework that they put in place. More instability that they put in place when they knew that the energy sector was going through a downturn. They need to scrap and do everything possible to stop the passage of Bill C-69 that they put in place, because it creates instability, it creates a new regulator and an environmental assessment process with indeterminate timelines. So if you are sitting at a corporate board table and you're trying to make a decision whether or not to invest, it's not about just getting to a yes. It's about getting to a yes or a no within a defined, clear set of time frames. And Bill C-69 completely undermines that. Any investor who is looking at investing in Canada's energy sector looks at Bill C-69 and says, no way. So they put that in place in a time of economic downturn, and they need to scrap that. They need to stop or scrap Bill C-48, which they put in place, which put in place the unilateral imposition of a ban on using BC's north coast for oil and gas exports. They put that in place. They need to reverse that. Bill C-86, which they put in place. It gives Cabinet the authority to unilaterally shut down the shipping of natural resources by water anywhere in Canada, including offshore oil and gas. That is instability that the sector looks at. They need to repeal that bill that they put in place during a major downturn in Canada's energy sector. They need to repeal Bill C-68. They need to stop it because it dramatically increases the red tape on project development by adding a multi-month review under the Navigable Waters Act for any water on a project site that is large enough to float a kayak. It adds instability, it is unnecessary red tape, and they need to repeal this bill that they put in place during a major energy sector downturn. They need to repeal and stop Bill C-88, which politicizes oil and gas development in the far north by providing Cabinet in Ottawa the unilateral power to shut down oil and gas development in the far north. And as well, they need to stop the proposed fuel standards that they're proposing to unveil before Christmas that will equate to a carbon tax of $228 per ton of fuel and almost certainly mean the end of the oil and gas sector. They also need to apologize for standing here and applauding Barack Obama after doing nothing to prevent the veto or speak against the veto of Keystone XL pipeline. They need to apologize for the fact that they did nothing while they allowed Denis Coderre to stand up and dump millions of litres of raw sewage in Quebec and say, you know what, Energy East is not in the best interest of Canada, we're just going to stand up here and agree with him. Nobody, the member from Calgary Centre, you know, that speech was just such a disgrace. He said he was going to pound on the table for pipeline. Pound on the table. Where was he when Denis Coderre? Where was he when Denis Coderre was doing it? Where was he? Well, he got kicked out of Cabinet. So there was our supposed voice in Cabinet in Calgary that did nothing to stop any of these bills. So there's that. They politically vetoed the Northern Gateway pipeline. Cabinet overturned in a political process, this government overturned a years-long regulatory review of the Northern Gateway pipeline that had over 200 conditions on it that was set and ready to go. That creates uncertainty, instability, and politicizes a system during a downturn in the energy sector. They need to invoke Section 9210C of the Constitution Act to bring the Trans Mountain Pipeline completely into federal jurisdiction so that BC cannot obstruct its blockage or its building out through permitting or other issues that are in their jurisdiction right now. They need to start building the Trans Mountain Pipeline. And I'm also sharing my time with the member from Peace River Westlock, Mr. Speaker. They need to start building the Trans Mountain Pipeline. If what the Prime Minister says is true, it's actually in the best interests of this country, why are they kicking the can down through a potential spring election window? If they're serious about it, they should be building it out today. There should be shovels in the ground tonight. And the last thing that they need to stop doing, Mr. Speaker, for the love of all that's holy, is stop abdicating the responsibility for getting these policies right. Every time they stand up here and say, oh, it's Stephen Harper's fault. They had 3 years to get these projects done, and everything that they've done, that litany of lists that is nowhere near complete, all they've done in every step of the way is add uncertainty and instability for the investors in Canada's energy sector and for the workers in my community. All the people in my riding want to do is get back to work, and everything that this government has done has been to abdicate responsibility and create instability. And the last thing that they need to do is the Prime Minister needs to stop going overseas and telling his true agenda to the world. Yeah. We want to phase out Canada's energy sector. If I'm a worker in Canada's energy sector, if I'm looking to invest in this, I'm saying, well, that's a pretty clear policy. Yeah. And he's backed it up with action. Every single one of these bills, every single one of these actions have been anti-energy sector. None of the Liberals can stand up in this place and say that they have done anything for Canada's energy sector, but they can tonight by undertaking repealing all of these bills and standing up and saying, look, we were wrong. This stuff was wrong. It created instability. It created the death of Canada's energy sector. We're running out of time. We are out of time. Build Trans Mountain, get the shovels in the ground tonight, repeal these bills, and start being serious about one of Canada's most prosperous and stable industries in this country.
Hear, hear.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Malpeque.
Mr. Speaker.
Just hold that for a moment. The honourable member. The honourable member for Sherwood Park, Port Saskatchewan. A point of order.
I know there's many members interested in speaking to this as well, and I wonder if I could seek unanimous consent for us to extend by 1 hour the period allotted for this emergency debate.
Yeah, I thank the honourable member for the point where we are under a what we called sort of an autopilot motion, where there are no dilatory motions in this type of debate, or that order was in fact passed by unanimous consent earlier this day. The honourable member, questions and comments. The honourable member for Malpeque.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I haven't been here for the whole night, but what I've been here for, Mr. Speaker, I see a lot of politics and a lot of solutions, and that last speech goes to the politics. Everything the Liberals done is bad. Didn't mention what the Conservatives done. That's what the member tried to say. You know, this crisis has been a long time coming. And this government has worked hard to try and get pipelines in place. I do agree with one thing the member said. She said, make it more certain and more stable in terms of where we're going with the energy industry and with pipelines. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, Bill C-69 is designed to try and find the balance between the environment and the energy industry and give that certainty for the future. You know, I'm pleased to have been in Alberta and across the country as chair of the Finance Committee. And I've heard a lot from the energy industry in Alberta, and they do need that stability and that certainty. I agree with that point. But the only way we're going to get there is to find solutions in this place instead of rather playing this partisan political game, which comes as much from that member as anyone in this House.
The honourable member for Calgary-Nose Hill.
I'll agree with the member from Malpeque on one thing. Bill C-69 does provide certainty for the energy sector. Certain death.
Absolutely.
Certain death. That is what every single industry leader has said about creating the most politicized process that is indeterminate in length with no particular reason as to why outside of to kill the energy sector. You know, I actually stood here and I said, here are all the things that this government needs to do to create certainty in the sector for the people in my riding who are out of work and for the investors who need to invest in these projects to make them go forward. This government will not admit responsibility or failure. They need to do that. They need to repeal these bills. They need to bring back certainty and stability in Canada's energy sector. And you know what? I'm not going to apologize, Mr. Speaker, for being good at my job.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for South Okanagan, West Kootenay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the member was calling on this government to get the shovels in the ground tonight on the Trans Mountain Pipeline project. You know, I don't know what part of the law she doesn't understand, but right now the Court of Appeals has struck down the permissions that the government gave to the Trans Mountain Pipeline. And, you know, if shovels went in the ground tonight, we'd be in court tomorrow and back at square one. So, I mean, this rhetoric about trying to rush things through, trying to repeal laws that are in the way, this is how we got here in the first place. So I just want to ask her, how, in what world does she think those things would create confidence of Canadians in this process, in our laws here, and get things actually going? Because this is what's caused the problem.
The honourable member for Calgary-Nose Hill.
We could be debating legislation tonight, Mr. Speaker, that would retroactively remedy or say that the tanker ban analysis that was done was complete and get the shovels in the ground tonight. If the government had appealed the Supreme Court decision and ordered a stay, we could have had shovels in the ground tonight. The reality is that the Prime Minister expects to come out to Calgary, the Finance Minister expects to come out to Calgary, and they expect to be met with adulation and, oh, thank you for your presence. It's so wonderful. But you know what? The people in my community are smart. They understand what this government could have done if they actually had the political will to get this thing done. It's either in the national interest or it's not. You can't have it both ways. And if they're serious about building these things out, they need to do every tool in their disposal to get this done, including having the political will to legislate on these things. They can't just let the courts do their dirty work for them in the long term without taking direction here in this place, and that is what they fail to do. It is unconscionable, it is unacceptable, and they need to go.